Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the truck by the frame so the front wheels are off the ground. After that, let's get under here and remove this plate. Now we're going to go ahead and remove our right front wheel. Now looking inside the passenger side wheel well, what you're going to see is these two holes in the frame right there. And inside those holes, you're going to find two bolts. Those bolts are what's going to be holding the idler arm assembly to the frame. So I'm just going to use a nice long ratchet with an extension, and I'm going to get right onto one of those bolts, and then we'll come onto the inside of the frame and remove the nuts. There's one. Do the same to the other. Now that I have both those nuts off, let's go ahead and remove this from the frame. We'll set that aside. And now we'll just come underneath and remove the nut that's holding it to the rest of the steering linkage. The next thing we're going to do is use a hammer and a pickle fork, and we're going to separate the two. It's going to come right in through the passenger side wheel well, just like this. Use the pickle fork going around both sides of that stud, and let's go ahead and knock it right out of here. There it is, friends. Now it's time to get our idler arm back on here. We're going to continue on to putting this stud inside of the steering linkage, and then of course we'll line up the bolts for the frame to the idler arm itself. There we are. Now I'm just going to carefully put these bolts through the actual holes. You want to be careful not to push the bolts into the frame. If you do, just go ahead and use a magnet and draw them out of there. Okay, so I've got my ratchet with the socket holding the bolt. Let's go ahead and snug these up. Once we have them both bottomed out, we'll torque them to 79 foot-pounds. All right, now it's going to be time to go ahead and torque these. I'm just going to hold on to the nut, and I'll use the socket with my extension and torque wrench on the outer aspect. Now it's going to be time to go ahead and put our castle nut on. I'm just going to come right in through the bottom. We'll start this on. Snug it up, and then we'll torque it to 60 foot-pounds. Okay, so now the next thing we want to pay attention to is the hole that's on the stud of the idler arm and the slots that are on the nut that go onto the idler arm. Essentially, we want to make sure that those match up. If for some reason after you torqued it, it doesn't line up, you need to continue tightening until the very next slot does line up. After you've done that, let's continue on by putting in our cotter pin. This is going to lock it in so there's no way it can loosen up on us. Then of course we'll pin it over so there's no way it can come apart. All right, so let's go ahead and get this shield on here. Start all of your bolts and then we'll snug them up. All right, let's go ahead and get the wheel back on here. We'll snug up all the lug nuts, make it so it's just barely touching the ground, and then torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. And of course, if you have your lug nut covers, go ahead and put those on as well. Okay friends, now that we got it back on the ground, the next thing you want to do is get yourself safely down to get a four-wheel alignment.